I'm here with Sarah Nguyen. We are speaking about her piece that she has submitted for the show The Space Between. It's hosted by the Alfa Art Gallery with the Women's Caucus for Art in New York City. Do you want to say anything to start off, to introduce yourself?
I'm a multimedia artist working out of Columbia, Missouri. And that's the only tidbit I really have to share at this point.
So you work a lot in paper, right?
Yes.
We kind of with like multimedia. What inspired you to choose that medium?
Paper, the piece that I have in the gallery right now is all just a hand-cut paper piece. And so paper is what that piece is. And I have, in my history, I've used paper on and off quite a bit. So, I think of, when I think of paper, I have this really warm, fuzzy feeling about it because it is a surface that we all start out with. Our first drawings, our first marks are done on paper. So it's very nostalgic, and I find myself always returning to it. But it wasn't until 2015 when I had an artist residency in Japan. And for the artist residency, I was studying folklore, in particular Shinto folklore. And I realized how much artwork was done on paper in Japan, which is obvious, but I didn't realize it until I was
it's not
there.
always for everyone. Yeah.
And coming across my research and interactions and just seeing all this artwork, I came across this word, which is a different character for the word, but it's pronounced the same way, and the word is kami, which means paper, but it also means spirit or soul, if you will, as an interpretation. And I just love that idea. It just was so great. And I thought, well, this makes sense that all these traditional Japanese pieces are done on paper, and the investigation as to what paper can do in origami and kirigami and just making of papers. I mean, the finest papers in the world can be argued made in Japan. And I just felt like there is this very underlining philosophical explanation of that culture for using this medium. And I really wanted to have that at the heart of what I do. So taking paper not just as a surface to put a mark on or content on, but to use it as the main character really came across. And ever since that residency, that is what I've been doing. That's really what I've been working on. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of part of what residencies are almost for, to teach you something new as well as, for whatever you're creating at the residency.
Right. Yes, I absolutely agree.
Yeah. Do you ever work in any other medium, or you really just focus on paper?
My background is being an illustrator, so I was trained in pretty much every possible medium that's out there as an undergraduate, because that's what my school did. And so I really fell in love with painting, and that was something that I developed and worked on for a very long time, and then started getting into more sculptural paintings. And but again, that return to paper really kind of struck, and I needed to I've just sort of developed in a way that I still feel like a painter, or I still feel like I'm drawing with like an X-Acto knife. It's still sort of the same kind of mark making and gestures. It's just with a knife or scissors rather than a paintbrush. So, and then I work digitally. I'm a book designer, and I do work as an illustrator. So there's a number I've done printmaking for illustrations. So it's sort of, when I take on those commissions or jobs, it's whatever medium fits. But when it really is for my own series, it is primarily paper and doing
it comes back to the paper. Okay.
It does. Yeah.
Okay. So the work that you submitted for this exhibition is called East of Eve, right? East of Eden.
It's
Eve.
Very close. It's called Eve, and then there's one that says Eve to Breathe. But I like East of Eden, but that's a movie, right?
Right, yeah. So that is kind of, a lot of your work is focused on like kind of biblical, like Old Testament, especially like female characters. What draws you to like using them as a subject in your work?
Well, I was thinking a bit about this after the last time we talked too, because I wasn't satisfied with my answer, and it's so hard. Oh, well, good. I'll try to remember that answer then. But it's so hard to talk about a series when you're sort of in progress with it. So the Women of the Old Testament series is ongoing, and I'm still working with these women.
Right.
But basically, what I have done in the past in my past work is my work always starts with some kind of story and narrative, some kind of folklore. And then I do a lot of research from that and try to see if there are outside things that I could sort of bring in that haven't been represented before, or something that I could add to the dialogue of whatever this story or narrative is, and then sort of go from there. And with the Women of the Old Testament series, it basically evolved from the series I was doing last year, where I had a year-long residency, and I was working on a series based on women writers and their work. So I went back to these journals that I had as an adolescent and saw that I had read all of these different women writers, Toni Morrison and Alice Walker and Flannery O'Connor and Virginia Woolf, and I just sort of, the Brontes, just sort of like a wide range. I grasping as you would as an adolescent for like a voice, something to connect to, right? But they were all amazing and all inspiring and all really out there too, kind of grotesque and, but a lot of commentaries about like the world that these women are in, and especially oppression. And so I did a series of painted, collage, cut paper kind of series based on that. And from there I thought, well, what else? What other women am I interested in to sort of talk to? Because when I do these pieces, I feel like I develop a relationship it's all in my head, but I develop a relationship with the characters or the authors or the place, or because you're really sort of doing a deep dive. And I thought about the women of the Old Testament, which they are represented, but there's not a whole lot of representation or research that goes into these women in terms of who they were during that time. There's a lot of, this person was good because they believed in God and then they had a son, or something of that sort.
That's their whole role,
Yes, to have babies, right? And I really wanted to go beyond that, because some of these women are really, excuse my language, are badass. Like
that's true. Yeah.
They fight in wars, and they're judges and they're queens, and they push forth, they go beyond all these things that are happening to them, and it's not a good time, the Old Testament time.
Yeah, it's not easy for anyone.
It's really not, and they manage to exist and do more than that, do more than just survive. They manage to flourish in a way. So I wanted to sort of figure out why, and I went really far back, starting with like the mythical people, Lilith, who is supposed to be the first Eve, and then Eve, and then I've done pieces about Sarah and, Rachel and Leah. And so I've been really diving into sort of the myths to characters that people feel a little closer to, because in a way they're a little closer to us in history.
Okay, yeah.
So I don't know if I answered this question at all.
No,
now.
you absolutely did. Yeah. No, definitely.
I'm sorry.
No, please, you're doing fine. Yeah. So did you focus on Eve for like any particular reason for this piece?
Yes. So the things that I was looking at Eve was I wanted to go beyond just the basic idea of the woman under a tree with a snake. Mm-hmm. And I looked at the meaning of Eve and what the meaning of what her name meant in Hebrew, and it means to breathe. So I thought about that, you know, the burden, the honor of the first woman breathing on earth, right? And then her whole story, she's basically being blamed for being cast out from Eden. But without that sort of casting out, we wouldn't have the human race.
That's true, yeah.
We wouldn't have basically what we have now. So there's that debate, you know, none of us probably would be alive, if you believe in all of that, if they weren't cast out to an extent. And I think all of human evolution and humanity's mistakes and histories, you know, sort of go back, if you will, you can make that argument, go back to that moment. But so I was looking for another sort of symbol, and the first piece is a symbol of a tree that is somewhat, it has fruit, of course, but it's a pomegranate tree, which harkens back to sort of the Greek and Roman myths of, you know, Persephone eating the pomegranates and Hades. There's a lot of that sort of thing. So there's always that sort of original sin going back into these myths. And then the second scroll piece on top of it is actually cut out is the word Eve, but also means to breathe. And this was somewhat inspired by the, you know, images of the coronavirus. So if you look, those words are basically in a circle, and it has sort of like these spiky sunlight things. And it goes either on top of it or to the side of it, because again, you know, this is something that we've had to deal with. The coronavirus is definitely about breath, or losing our breath. And in many ways, especially in the United States, we're holding our breath.
Absolutely,
right now, and waiting for something better to happen, or you know,
just waiting for everything to get better. Yeah,
right.
Because you made this piece while you were in quarantine, so that obviously had like a big influence. Because that was kind of another one of my questions, like how differently you think this would have turned out if you, like, the quarantine wasn't a thing, and you know, it could be a totally different piece.
Right, and I don't know if there would have been a second piece. I don't know if there would have been that dialogue necessarily. I do try to bring in, you know, my contemporary thoughts and what I'm feeling into every piece. I don't want it just to be an illustration of like the past. But I certainly don't think it would have had that imagery that's everywhere. I mean, you look at any kind of thing online and there's that little coronavirus cell. Like, I think we'll always remember it. You know?
I think corona is supposed to be because it's shaped like a crown. I think I read that somewhere. Yeah.
Right. Like sort of the crown in the sun, that kind of
something like that.
So and I don't think it would have come out that way. I also don't know if I would have made that part of it so the to breathe, that repetition in that piece of that word, to breathe, to breathe, to breathe, so prevalent without being quarantined, without sort of, you know, being worried about that, being stuck at home, being, you know, grieving the way we are as a country.
For everything, for all the events and, you know, let alone the people. It's just everything is so affected.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Okay.
So you kind of touched on your background about like your residencies and your influences, like, you know, during that or during like your, you know, illustrative work. How do you think that background has kind of influenced you as an artist, like as for your growth?
It's very interesting to think about this now because so much is sort of stopped in a way, you know, and I talked to colleagues and peers, and everybody is sort of feeling like, how do we continue to grow? How do we continue to push on and find new ways of interacting and sort of continue our growth as artists? When I look back in the past, I used residencies to come up with new ideas. So travel was a big part of it. In my family, I've had artists in my family, and they, you know, it was really a big part of my life, knowing that being an artist would be accepted, which is a hard thing. Many people don't get that.
Definitely,
you know?
Yeah. There's definitely like a stigma for art students. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It's very, it breaks my heart sometimes because I will see people who are just amazing, and you feel like they really can change the world, but they don't have the support that given from their family. Or, you know, it comes down to money. How can you support yourself as an artist? It's always the first question I get whenever I'm in any kind of, if I'm teaching or workshop.
I believe it, yeah.
You know, how does this work?
Right.
And so I feel like all of those things have helped me get to this point. You know, the residencies, teaching, you know, constantly just sort of searching for work. But I'm at a point now where I'm also feeling like, where do I go? How do I, you know, I feel very honored and lucky that my work is showing in a gallery that does have people coming into it.
It does now, yeah.
Which is fantastic. Right. But it also, that's limited, you know, our typical ways of expressing and communicating and getting new ideas, as you would when you have a group show. Like, you get to see all the other artists' work, which is amazing. And you can say, oh, you know, I never thought of doing that with color or print, or, wow, that's amazing, you know. That has become limited right now in this time. So I'm very grateful, one, that, you know, your gallery is showing the work in person, but also virtually, which is fantastic. So,
yeah, we've had exhibitions that are just virtual. This one was kind of both, since it kind of happened when things were starting to reopen. So it's, I mean, it's good that you're kind of able to adapt if you can make your art virtual for everyone to see.
Right. So that's one way. That's like a new platform, I think. I'm also trying to figure out, well, you know, where I am and with the limited galleries that are around in order to open up, like, how do I show my work? Do I just put my work out there and just sort of say, okay, now it's public, you know, and there you go.
Happens.
Right, exactly. So I feel like, I know this doesn't really address the question, but it is a dilemma I'm sort of dealing with. Like, okay, how am I going to evolve? How are we as a community of artists going to evolve to adapt to this brave new world that we're in, you know, and so that we can continue to work and to continue to reflect and change.
Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So would you say, like, you mentioned like your family really supported you as an artist. Do you think that kind of had like an impact on you to become a career artist?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Definitely.
You know, when I've been asked, like, you know, why would you become an artist? As, you know, also in addition to like, how do you make money as an artist? And my answer has always been, I could never do anything else. I mean, it's something that, I can't imagine a day going by without making. And if a day does go by without making, I'm not a nice person. I feel really bad. It's a bad day. And so I pretty much knew from an early stage that was it. That, you know, in order for me to just be a good neighbor, but also I was very lucky because my grandmother was an artist and it was accepted and understood and looked up to. Like I looked up to her and thought, wow, this is amazing. You get to spend all your day doing this? Like,
it sounds
that's
like fun.
The life. Right. And I know that many people don't have that support. And so that is something that I just really value in my background. I think there are people that I know that had much more of a challenge in their past in order to become, artists. But that doesn't take away from the fact that they're amazing, and I feel like people become artists when they're meant to.
Yeah, because unfortunately it isn't always just about talent. It's really, there's a lot of factors that influence if you can even become a career artist, like if that's an option for you, because it's not for a lot of people.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, no, and I would say looking at it, it's really, I hate to say this, but it is a lot about luck. I mean, I feel like I work very, very hard, and many of the career artists I know work very, very hard, but there were some lucky opportunities. And again, it's networking, all of those types of things. But it's also a matter of how you define success, and so I have come to the point where I define my success as just being a good neighbor and being happy and making every day. And, for some people that doesn't do it. It doesn't feed their body and soul. So, I think in many ways there are those, you do have to adapt as an artist to sort of figure out that.